rabbis believed that our tradition was a living, breathing body of text that deserved to be wrestled with and grappled with and most definitely added to. So they wrote stories about stories, and I called them Midrashim. And so tonight, we add to their voices with an original Midrash. After 900 years, Eve was old and tired and beginning to slip away. She lived a long life and a full one, raised generation after generation of children, and helped build an entirely new world for them all to live in. But none of it seemed to matter anymore. Almost 1,000 years later, 1,000 years had collapsed into just one awful day, one terrible loss she could never escape. On clear mornings, Eve liked to sit in the doorway of their tent, eyes closed, soaking in the desert sun. She'd sit there for hours and hours, losing herself in a time long, long ago, a time when she was just a young, tired mother running after 2 rambunctious boys. Cain had always been the gentle one, the patient gardener who loved the vegetables and the herbs he cared for. Cain was the little boy who transformed a desert stream into an oasis full of food and plenty. It was his brother who was the wild one. Abel was the strong shepherd who kept the sheep in their place with the force of his rod and his staff. Abel was the hunter, the heroic young warrior who was always on the move and always looking for adventure. Cain, Abel, it's time for dinner. But no one came. Cain, Abel. And then Eve remembered the conversation she thought she'd had with her boys this morning, and how eager Cain had been to explain his new plans for the irrigation system, and how busy and dismissive she'd been, and how she was always comparing one brother to the other, and that sacrifice to God was her idea, the sacrifice that would determine which brother would lead the future of their clan, the sacrifice that would change everything. Eve opened her eyes, heart pounding. Cain, Abel, where are you? She struggled to her feet and began frantically searching for her sons, mind scattering in a dark, desperate fear that felt all too familiar. Where are you, my sons? What has happened? What have I done? She would shuffle to her feet and as fast as she could, hoping each and every morning that she would finally reach the field in time, her whole world hinging on her ability to get there and stop the violence that could not be undone. Most afternoons, Adam found her weeping at the family's altar, their son's blood calling out to her, even then. That's enough, Eve. They're long gone. They're dead, Adam. It's my fault. I killed our sons. Eve would be desperate, shaking and crying and weeping until finally Adam would crouch down and take her hands in his. Cain killed Abel. It was not your fault, Eve. And Cain is fine now. He has a wife and a family. He is not dead. You did not kill your sons. It was no one's fault but their own. And Adam would look at his wife, at his partner, and feel his heart breaking all over again, willing her to come back to him and leave the pain of the past firmly in the past. It was just too hard. On some days, Eve seemed to hear him and would come back to herself, but on others, she just retreated further and further away, leaving Adam all alone. And the more alone Adam felt, the more he began to resent his wife and her fixation on that awful, awful day. And the more time passed, the more he judged himself for resenting the woman he loved so deeply. Months and then years went by. The resentment and the guilt and the brief, precious moments of beauty layered one on top of the other, building up and hardening into vast tracts of untilled silence and hurt. But then one day, to everyone's surprise, Cain finally came home. He was no longer the jealous teenager, but an old man himself, leaning on a twisted staff. He had dreamed of this moment for many, many lonely centuries, of the tears in his mother's eyes as she raced towards him with beaming, open arms, of his father's quiet grin as he recognized his eldest son and saw how tall he had grown. They would both be in the fields when they saw him, he was sure of it, hard at work, older than they had been, but still young and strong, the way Cain had always remembered them, timeless and ageless, mom and dad, Ima and Abba, not old, frail strangers who could no longer survive on their own. But his mother was weeping at the altar when he found her. Ima, it's me, it's Cain, your son. Please don't cry. I'm here now. My sons, have you seen my sons? It's all my fault. I can't find them anywhere. Ima, it's me. It's Cain. I'm here and you did nothing wrong. It was my fault, not yours. I should not have let my jealousy rule me, and I really should not have let God dictate the course of our lives. I shouldn't have run away, and most of all, I should never have killed my brother. I made my own choices, not you. I'm so sorry, Mom. Please forgive me. But it was too late. Eve was lost in a world that had already happened. She couldn't see her little boy in the old man in front of her. He was just a stranger, and her grief and her guilt seemed too much to bear. But Cain had not traveled all of this way just to give in to his shame now. Instead, he took a deep breath and grasped his mother's hand, knowing that he had one last gift to give. And so, in a voice rusty after long disuse, Eve's eldest son began to sing song after song from his childhood, the songs she herself had sung to him when he was scared in the middle of the night or sick during the heat of the day. Eve relaxed into the music, letting the melody transport her to happier, simpler times. Adam was tilling the fields when he first heard his son's lullaby. At first, he didn't know what he was hearing, just that it was familiar and important, and his face was suddenly covered in tears. What was it about that voice and that melody? He dropped his plow in the dirt and scrambled towards the song, his heart beating with hope he thought had long since gone. For the first time in long, long years, Adam could finally see the possibility of a different tomorrow, and he was determined to make it count. It was time to forgive himself for a past he could no longer change, time to forgive and rebuild and ask for the help and the support he so desperately needed. And he didn't have to do it alone. He had other choices now, and he had a son and a family who needed him. Today was the day Adam would finally begin to forgive himself and the people he loved, taking the first scary steps on the long road towards healing, a journey fraught with pain and mistakes and moments of joy, but one which Adam was finally ready to begin, more than ready, eager even. It was time to get his family back and hopefully find himself in the process.